Thank you, Congressman, for all the great work you've been doing. It's been really incredible and moving watching all the efforts that have been mobilized in support of Sudan on the Hill. Thank you all for all the work you are doing on this issue. Thank you, International Religious Freedom Caucus, for hosting this timely and important event. I'm Muhammad Abu Bakr, human rights activist, born and raised in Caucus Sudan, and a new immigrant to the United States. And I'm the president of the African Middle Eastern Leadership Project. Before I throw on you numbers and statistics about what happened on the crackdown that happened recently in Sudan, I'm going to speak first to you about what those numbers and statistics mean to me personally, because they are certainly not just numbers and statistics. I'll speak in a minute about the massacre committed by the Transitional Military Council, TMC, about the rape of women and men by the militia of Janjaweed, which is headed by the vice president of this council, about the fear that is spreading across Sudan and is experienced by all civilians by this militia as they move to the cities and inserted themselves among civilians. To me, when we speak of those killed and raped, to me personally, it's speaking about colleagues, people I had the honor of serving along their sides back in Sudan, in many humanitarian initiatives that I was involved in. And so were they, and those raped include a friend who made me listen to hours of a boy band, terrible one called Backstreet Boys, by force, because her car, her rules, and who took me to my very first Catholic Mass in Khartoum. The terrified public I'm talking about, who are terrified by this militia moving next door to them, are literally my family, my own mother, my sisters, my little nephews. They are right now, as we speak, as of me walking into this room, are barricaded behind the closed door because this militia literally moved right next door to their residence in Sudan. And this uprising began in 2018, in December 2018, and it was from day one a very diverse and broad movement that included men, women, with the majority women leading the effort and the protest. Muslims, Christians, atheists, agnostics, people from all walks of life and all the rainbow of communities that make up Sudan. And since day one and until now, and even throughout all these attempts of crackdown, throughout all the violence, all the live bullets shooting, it remained 100% non-violent. A principled, non-violent uprising by all means. Not for lack of means of violent protest, as my colleague noted, but out of belief that democratic, free Sudan, that we grant them the right and freedoms they are yearning for, is unlikely to come as a result of violent uprising. And when they succeeded in overthrowing Bashir on April 11th, they knew better than just to celebrate and go home. They did not do that. What they did, they knew they had to remain in the streets to protect their revolution, and knew better than to let the military junta run the show. They knew that until a transfer of power to a civilian interim government was complete, it would be too early to celebrate. But they they continued their sit-in, while negotiators discussed with the TMC on their behalf. Principled as that uprising was within Sudan, outside in the region, it wasn't as principled by any means. And it wasn't received as a principled uprising by our neighbors. Things have not been so ethical. In Egypt, al-Sisi is terrified still of a domino effect and a rerun of 2011 for him. In Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the people, the states that employ the very same militia, the very same Janjaweed militia that is terrorizing the public right now, and the same militia that committed all these atrocities that we have been, hearing of since childhood about Darfur, was all committed by that militia. And that same militia is now employed by Saudi and Emirates, and it's supplying them with child soldiers to fight their war in Yemen. And having to, God forbid, fight their own war is their biggest fear. So they have been, the triangle of Saudi, Egypt, and Emirates decided to shamelessly and publicly support the TMC and to share the know-how that LCC perfected over the last few years, cracking down on pro-democracy and human rights activists in Egypt, while the Gulf states generously supplied financial and propaganda support to the vice president of the TMC and his militias. Immediately after TMC visits to these three countries, in late May, the shutdown of the internet happened. The very violent massacre of protesters began, and it was no coincidence. Egypt, Saudi, and Emirates are betting that the United States will not act because of their status as allies. They have been exploiting this fact throughout this uprising. I'm betting that the United States will not act, and because of the perception of them being a line of defense against Iran. For how long can allies embarrass and endanger the United States before we, perhaps find new allies and who actually perhaps share our freedoms and who wouldn't embarrass us in every turn? And one must ask, where is the breaking point? 9/11 wasn't the breaking point. Spreading these Wahhabi madrasas that radicalized hundreds of thousands of youth wasn't the breaking point. Holding the people of Yemen captive and starving more than 85,000 children in Yemen to death wasn't the breaking point. Then perhaps maybe now should be the breaking point. Perhaps now it's time for the United States to once again take a brave and unapologetic action in support of democracy and use the leverage it has on Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Emirates to steer change in Sudan in a positive way. With the proper US pressure, these countries can be convinced and be made to pressure the Sudanese generals to stop their attempts to cling to power by massacring non-violent democratic protesters. We should do this, perhaps if not for the sake of global democracy and human rights and liberty, for all the persecuted minorities, religious and ethnic minorities in Sudan and in the region, perhaps maybe we should do it for just out of sheer self-interest. Because Janjaweed militia produced more than 4 million refugees and IDPs in Sudan. That's when they were just a small militia, ethnic militia that is running rampant in Darfur. Now they are 1 million times strong and they could produce 40 million refugees. Are we ready to deal with that? Are we ready to live with the consequences of what their rule might mean for Sudan and for the region and for this country, as well as other developed nations? Sudan also presents a very rare opportunity for a quick win, and again, speaking from the self-interest of the United States. Could be, Sudan presents a rare opportunity for a win against China and Russia simultaneously. The US has been systematically losing ground in Africa for decades now, and China triumphed for far too long without any competition. Gaining a liberal democratic Sudan as an economic partner and a gateway to Africa is an opportunity not to be missed out on. And here's the thing, Saudi Arabia and Emirates and Egypt and others, they will always remain allied to the United States, no matter what action the United States takes on this issue. Because, let's face it, they need the United States a lot more than the United States need them. For them, it's an existential alliance. There is no Saudi Arabia without the United States. They know it very well, and they will always remain allied to the US because there's just not any other alternative. There is no way around that. And the United States has everything to gain by taking the moral stance of strongly coming out in support of the pro-democracy movement in Sudan. and very little to lose. There is absolutely very little risk for the United States by taking this stance. The United States should not be viewed as one that is held hostage to its allies and in the name of fighting Iran. I mean, Iran is definitely a very real threat to the United States and clearly to its ally Israel. And Ayatollah has never been, trying to hide that even a little bit. But history teaches us that whenever we try to contain evil by going against our own values and principles and by empowering evil from an opposing side, it always comes back to haunt us and to bite us. And those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. More than 118 were killed in the immediate aftermath of the crackdown. Reports of more than 160 more have been killed in Darfur that have been coming out in the last 2 days. More than 70 confirmed cases of rape of women and men have been reported. And hundreds have been imprisoned and hundreds more are still missing, likely to be also dead. Bodies were thrown in the Nile, tied to cement bricks, large cement blocks to make them drown and to hide this crime. There is a very clear ethical thing to be done here, and the United States cannot be the one to beat around the bushes here. We can do a lot more than just thoughts and prayers for those who are putting everything literally in the line for freedom, liberty, democratic values that we share. Please ask all of us how the United States can do that and achieve that, and we are happy to answer. Thank you so much.